Good evening, everyone. The open meeting law requires that I notify the public that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please be aware that an audio and visual recording of this meeting is being made and broadcast by Boston City TV, which is a part of the City of Boston Office of Cable Communications. And now I hand it over to Jerry.
Hi, my name is Jerry Boyd. I have the honor of being the chair of the advisory board, and I'm from West Roxbury. And I am going to call on the first person on the advisory board to introduce themselves. But going forward through our introductions, I'd rather just have somebody identify themselves and speak up. I don't want to have to call on everyone. So why don't we go ahead, Elizabeth? You may be on mute, Elizabeth. We could get back to her. Elizabeth, wait a minute. I'm going to call on someone else, and then you can go at another point, okay? Olivia.
Hi, I'm Olivia Richard, resident of Brighton, member of the board.
And again, who would like to speak next?
Paul Richardson, Brighton.
Okay, great.
Dusia Lubovskaya from Boston, Mission Hill specifically, board member.
Great.
Jerry, if I could just interrupt for a moment. Those who are on the phone, I have manually muted all of you. So in order to speak up, you will need to press *6 on your phone. That will unmute you. We were simply getting some feedback on the phones, so I've muted everybody. But in order to unmute yourself to speak, you have to hit *6.
Okay. Next.
Hello, this is Paul. This is Paul Karen. I'm calling from the phone. I just unmuted myself, and I'm privileged to be part of the advisory board, Boston, Massachusetts, and I work for the Boston Planning and Development Agency.
Great. Who would like to go next from the board?
Hello.
Go ahead, Yardley.
Hey there, I'm Yardley Sanchez, board member since 2018, and I reside in Dorchester.
Hi, this is Wesley Ireland, speaking through a sign language interpreter today. I live in the North End. I am also a board member.
And I do hear feedback, so should we mute folks, Jessica, or what?
I am going through and muting everyone that I can find. So everyone should assume that they are muted moving forward. But if you could manually and unmanually, and if you could manually mute and unmute yourself, that would be great. It's the button on the bottom of the screen if you are on your computer, and it is *6 on your phone.
Hello,
Thank you so
everyone.
much.
This is Juan Carlos Ramirez. I live in Boston South End. Advisory board member.
Great.
And I'm Elizabeth Winklower, Vice Chair, and I live in Back Bay.
Great. Is that everyone from the advisory board? Hearing no response, I'm going to assume that it is then. The next thing on the agenda is to approve the August minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
I second. This is Carl. I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? That's the type of motion I like. The motion passes unanimously. And next we have a city presentation from, I'm sorry, Carol, can you tell me again what office you're from? And it's from Carol Leon.
Yeah, of course. So I am with the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement.
Great. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So just bear with me. And then I will ask people to verify whether or not they can see my screen.
Yep, we can see it,
You're
Can you
Carol.
see it? Wonderful.
Nothing on my end yet.
Great. So I'm just going to start with the very first slide. The really sad thing about this is that I stop seeing everyone once I start sharing my screen. Let me see if maybe I can make it smaller, but if I make it smaller, I might stop presenting. Yes, that's very unfortunate. So I will not see you, but I will try my best to stay very animated. And if I'm talking too fast, please let me know, because sometimes I do that. So I'll try to keep myself at a good pace. So I'll go ahead and start presenting. And there you go. So again, my name is Carol Leon, and I am the Programs Manager at the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you to Commissioner Akash and to Jessica for inviting me to present here with all of you today. So let me start with the very first slide. So for those who might not be familiar with the office, and I would actually be very curious, normally if I was able to see the chat, I would see what the responses are, but I can hear you. So if someone wants to unmute themselves and say whether or not they had heard of the office before, I'm always just very curious to know if people had heard of us before.
This is Jerry. I might have heard of you in passing before.
Okay.
I see at least one head shaking and hand raised as in yes.
Okay, so for those who are not familiar with the office, just to give you a little bit of history really quickly. So the office was created in 1998. So we have been around for quite a bit. And the name of the office used to be the Office of New Bostonians. The goal of the office is to involve immigrants in Boston's civic, social, and cultural life. And we also make sure that immigrants have the same access to services that all residents enjoy. And we work hard to highlight the role that immigrants play in Boston's growth. So that is basically just a little bit of the history and the mission of the office. I always like to mention how special the office is in a way, because not all municipalities around the country have an office that is completely dedicated to serving immigrant communities the way that we do here in Boston. So, and just to give you an overview, and of course, things will probably change, especially after we receive the information for the new census, which plug, if you have not filled out the census, I would definitely encourage everyone to participate in the census. There's still a week left. But these are just some of the demographic information around what are some of the countries that are the biggest, like immigrant communities, or the countries that are represented amongst immigrants in the city of Boston. So as you can see, we have China, the Dominican Republic, and Haiti represented as the largest communities here, but we have a great diversity in terms of the communities that are represented in the city of Boston. So what I'm really here to talk to everyone about is a little bit of the work that our office has been doing during COVID. Especially, of course, the pandemic really changed a little bit of the way that we're doing work and some of the projects that we've been working on. And also to tell you a little bit about some of the new programs that we have been working on, even as COVID is happening. So the very first thing that I want to mention, in case you did not know about these, at the beginning of the pandemic, this was, I can't believe that I'm going to say this in March. The team basically came together to create a guide of resources available to the community regardless of their immigration status. This guide was translated into 11 different languages, and it includes information around food, medical care, child care, affordable housing. And if you were to visit our website, you will find the guide, and you will find the guide also translated into all other languages. The purpose of this guide was just a very quick response that we had to ensure that immigrant communities had the information of what were the resources available, especially around some of the issues that we were seeing were the biggest ones, as rent, especially once the pandemic started to once we started to see that it was going to be longer, we started to see that people weren't able to pay for rent because they lost their jobs. And of course, a lot of people being very unsure of where to go for testing, where to get medical care, especially if they were presenting symptoms. So we put this guide together very quickly, but I think a lot of the information there is still very relevant, especially for those folks that might not know what are the services that they are eligible for, regardless of their immigration status. The next thing that I wanted to mention are the webinars that we have been posting. So one of the other things that we started to quickly realize was that we were not going to be able to meet in person anytime soon. But we still wanted to communicate with our community partners around what the city was doing, what we were doing, and what other organizations were doing to respond to some of the needs that we were seeing in the community. So we've been having, I think as of today, we've had around 17 webinars that we've hosted. We get an average of around, I want to say probably like 30 to 40 community organizations that work with immigrant communities into the webinar. And we've talked about a great variety of different resources. So we've talked about the rental relief fund. We've talked about resources for victims of domestic violence. We've talked about resources for, around the eviction. So we've also been hearing from our community partners around what are some of the topics that they want to hear about. And even most recently, we had a couple of organizations, TSNE Mission Works and Massachusetts Nonprofit Network, to talk about what are some of the resources available to nonprofit organizations, especially during these really hard times that are also hitting our nonprofit partners. So these webinars happen now every other Tuesday. We started having them every week, but we changed them to happen a little bit less often as we started to see that some of the needs were changing and we were prioritizing other projects. But they are 1 hour webinars that we still have every other Tuesday at 2 p.m. The other thing that is really important for me to mention, we are still hosting our free consultations with volunteer lawyers. These happen the first and the third Wednesday of the month, and we have been having phone consultations. So people basically call our office, they call our office number, and we have a wonderful staff member. His name is Luigi Lane. He's been the person coordinating the clinics, and he's been picking up the phone to basically register people to the consultation. Once people submit a waiver that they have to sign and another form that they have to sign, they basically receive a call from an immigration lawyer on Wednesday for them to have a one-on-one free consultation with an immigration lawyer. So this is something that we still have and a service that is still happening even in the midst of the pandemic. And then just to talk a little bit about programs that we have been developing in tandem of COVID and other things that we have been doing. So there's two. I will start with Immigrants Lead Boston, and then I will talk a little bit about our citizenship campaign. So Immigrants Lead Boston is a program that was in the process of getting developed even before COVID. And then of course we had to change a few things about the program, but the purpose of this is basically a civic program for emerging immigrant leaders, for them to learn about the resources that the city offers, and for them to learn how to navigate the city of Boston and the different departments that comprise the city of Boston. So the goal for the program is to basically increase the representation of immigrant communities in the civic life of the city of Boston, to increase the participants' resources and knowledge and relationships to engage with the city of Boston. And then we want to create a group of ambassadors that will assist the city of Boston in bringing the information about the programs and initiatives that the city has to offer to their community. And it will also be really good for us to strengthen our relationship with immigrant communities. So you're probably wondering, how many people are you having? How is this going to work? Is it going to be, online, which I will have a whole other slide to explain all of that. So we just closed the applications, unfortunately, but we did receive 110 applications of folks that were interested in participating in the program. The program is going to be a 10-session program. We will be giving folks a stipend a $100 stipend to participate. So they will receive a total of $1,000 at the end of their participation in the program. It will be online because of COVID, and it will be a 1.5 hour session where we will invite city officials to have a conversation with participants, and then we will dedicate the other half hour to developing a civic capstone project. So that would basically be a project that people are really passionate about. They will think of a topic that they're passionate about. It could be housing, it could be another issue, and they will basically work on developing a project at the end. That could result maybe in a community meeting with folks in their community where they will invite the city official to talk to them about the resources that they have to offer, or it could look very differently. So that's something that we'll see, what it looks like probably towards the end of the program. And then this is a list of the topics that we'll cover in the session for folks that might be just interested in learning a little bit more about, some of the topics that we'll be covering. The topics that we chose are based on a survey that we sent out to our community partners, where we asked them which ones were the topics that they thought would be the most important for us to teach to emerging immigrant leaders in the community. And then changing gears a little bit, just to tell you a little bit about our citizenship efforts. So every year we have a really big workshop where we assist people with their citizenship application. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we had to cancel the in-person workshop where we normally help. We've helped probably, I think it was last year that we helped over 400 applicants for the first time ever in the 7 years of the program. But this year we had to change the format a little bit to create an awareness campaign and to encourage people to apply for citizenship. One of the main reasons why I wanted to mention these, even though the campaign already wrapped up, is because there is still time for people to apply for citizenship before a really important deadline of October 2nd, where the federal government announced that they will be increasing the application cost for citizenship, and they will be radically changing, if not completely decimating, the fee waiver application. So basically before, just so you have an idea, when we have our Citizenship Day, I think if I'm not mistaken, I think it's 60% of applicants from the 400 applicants were eligible for a fee waiver, which means that they didn't have to pay for the fee to apply for citizenship. The fee cost is $725. The fee will not only increase from $725 to $1,200. The fee waiver, which normally people would be able to apply for it by only showing that they received the government benefit, the fee waiver will completely change and it will become almost unavailable to folks, or it will be very difficult for folks to fill out. The increase in fees not only applies for citizenship, but they will also be increasing the fee for green cards, and they will be imposing a fee on asylum. And the United States will become one of 4 countries in the whole world that will ask people to pay for an asylum application. So all these changes are supposed to go in effect on October 2nd. There is litigation against the federal government so that the changes don't go through, but we're gonna have to wait and see what happens with that. And then of course, one of the last things that I wanted to mention before I take questions is that us as a department, we are constantly working with other departments to see how we can ensure that folks in the community know about the different benefits that are available to them. And I know that Jessica and I had talked a little bit about a benefits campaign that the city is putting together. I know the Age Strong Commission, if I'm not mistaken, has been leading that effort, and we're basically trying to figure out how to alert people of the different benefits that they're eligible. One example that I can give you is that we're working very closely with the Department of Neighborhood Development to put together a one-pager of resources, especially for folks that are facing eviction. So we're constantly working on making sure that we're giving the right information to our communities. It's been very difficult, especially because of COVID, but we are trying our best to make sure that our immigrant community stay informed about what the city has to offer and the nonprofits have to offer to them. So I think that I stayed within the time frame. Yes, you can tell me if I went over, if I still have time.
You are good.
Great. So I will take any questions that people may have. I'm going to stop.
There were 2 questions in the chat, Carol.
Oh, let me open it.
One is, are your previous webinars available online? And the second
Yes.
question is, are your webinars accessible? That question is asked by Wesley, and I'm hoping, Wesley, you could expand on if there's a specific thing about accessibility that you were looking for.
Sure. So I would, for accessibility, you know, thinking there are some websites that will show on the, hold on one second. So, sorry, so there are some websites, and you think about, they'll show if there's like wheelchair, you'll see that symbol. And that's a way to show that that website or webinars is accessible for sound and sight. So that kind of thing. So I'm wondering if those kind of accessibility measures can be implemented.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great observation. I'm glad that that was brought up because that's something that I can bring up with the team. Right now, the information has gone to, we don't really have a flyer to promote the webinar. We've just been sending out the information to our nonprofit partners, but that is something that we can definitely work on to make sure that the webinars are accessible to people. And that's something that even Jess and I can talk a little bit about to make sure that we continue to make these webinars accessible to everyone in the future, because we will continue hosting them.
Ducia had a question. Ducia, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Sorry, Jerry, I was just gonna go back to Commissioner's original question.
Well, I'm
Car-
sorry.
No worries. Carol, are the previous webinars available online?
Yes, and the other thing is that I can make, we have the recording for all the webinars. So if anyone was very interested in a specific topic, I would be happy to send the recording to anybody that would request it. But I think with the exception of a couple of them, we did stream them on Facebook Live, so they are available on our Facebook page. But if they're not and you're interested in a topic, I'm happy to send a list of the topics we've covered. I'm happy to facilitate the video.
And Carol, what platform do you use? Just following up on Wesley's question about access.
We have been using Zoom. That's a platform that we have been using. And I know that Zoom is not the most, I think, friendly when it comes to accessibility. So that is definitely something that we would probably look into, but that's a platform that we have been using.
Do you know if you have captions? Do you have captions as a third party? Because Zoom doesn't typically offer them.
No, we haven't done that. And that's actually something that I was thinking about, because I think Google Hangouts does provide the captions. So I definitely think it's worth revisiting. But if someone were to request it and there was a way for us to provide that, we would definitely work on getting it. But I know Google Hangouts is better for that.
All right, we'd be happy to follow up with you to help with that.
Yeah,
This
and
is wonderful.
Wes, I just want to add one thing about another platform that does provide captions. Microsoft Teams is something you might want to look into.
Wonderful. Thank you for that recommendation. Yes.
Great. Carl has a question or a comment.
So Zoom is very, very blind friendly, so there's no issue there. But I agree with Wesley on their captions. And I can't remember the name of the service, but I'll email it to the commissioner and she can forward it to you. I just tried Zoom with AI captions through a service where I paid, I think, $20 a month for, and it did AI captions within Zoom. So I will email the commissioner and let her know so she can forward that to you.
Yeah, I would love to get that information. Thank you, Carl.
And
Thank you.
now Ducia had a question. Go ahead, Ducia. I guess you're on mute, Ducia.
Or did she step away for a moment, perhaps?
Well, Yeah, her question's on the chat, so I'll take the liberty and go ahead and ask the question. She said, I think I saw your graph of the top 10 countries of new Bostonians. It was from 2016. Do you have any more recent data?
I think that the most updated information is from 2018. I would have to dig it. It's from the Boston Planning and Development Agency. The information is from the census. So I think that we'll be getting new and updated information once the census is over and all the information is processed. But I can make sure to follow up with the most updated information from BPDA so that everyone has that. The variation is very slight, but I'm glad that you made that observation. I'll make sure to include the newest information.
Great, thank you so much. And Elizabeth has a question.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. I don't know if could you just clarify is the Disability Commission Office already represented in some of these webinars, or because I know in some cultures there's even different levels of stigma, as a generalization, but different levels of stigma or understanding about even that there might be resources available in the community, not just governmental, but in the school system, that kind of thing. For instance,
yeah, I think that's a really good question, and that's something that the nonprofits that we work with, I'm not sure if there's like an overlap in terms of working with the communities that you serve. What I think we could do is that Jess and I can probably think of a strategy to make sure that there is a representation, especially of organizations that do have an overlap that work with both the communities that we work with. Because if there's no representation now, I would love for like someone to, come in and, represent the community during the webinars. But not only that, I'm also thinking that we haven't really had a webinar around, special resources or resources specifically, for the communities that you serve either. So I think that would also be like an interesting thing for us to like think about, to maybe like host a webinar around that and around the resources that the Disabilities Commission has identified right now, specifically around COVID.
Yeah, Carol, just to add to that, my staff and I are going to be working on some webinars as well to talk about benefits specifically for persons with disabilities. So that would be something that we would love maybe to host as one of your websites. I saw that they are scheduled through January. Is that the end of them, or what did your schedule go through?
Oh, for the webinar?
Yeah.
We have no idea how long they're going to keep going. I think that it's, honestly, our community partners have really liked the webinars because we've been maintaining a really good line of communication through them. Even if there's some partners that might not be able to join some of them, they try to join other ones. So I think that they're probably going to go until next year. I think that we're just going to continue them all the way until the end of the year and probably reevaluate in January. I would see them continuing even if it's only once a month for the future.
So maybe we can plan to do one specifically on disability issues for people who are immigrants?
Yes, I think that would be absolutely wonderful.
That would be great.
Yeah, thank you for the suggestion, Elizabeth.
And I do think it's important because the communities do overlap. And I'm particularly concerned, say, about the situation of immigrants with children, where it might be for people who come from cultures where English is a second language, that there might be some challenge of teasing out without the knowledge of specialists to do the testing, et cetera, which things are language barriers of just understanding English versus what are some other learning disabilities or children on the spectrum, that kind of thing. So that's great, and I think that's very helpful that the commissioner also has webinars in mind.
Juan has a question.
Yeah, I guess it's hello?
Yes, go ahead, Juan.
Okay, great. Hi, Carol. Thank you very much for your presentation. I guess this is a comment kind of question as well, which adds to what Elizabeth was talking about earlier. So one of the main things for someone who is new and wants to access to these services is perhaps the question, am I eligible for these services, right? The number of families impacted is still unknown as the business closures and more social distancing measures are being ordered. But the impact is real, and for undocumented families, for example, and many others who may have limited English proficiency or other technical abilities to access to the online resources, it's very hard, very difficult for them. So I was wondering if you have additional comments on efforts channeled towards helping to mitigate these struggles.
Yeah, of course, and I'm really happy that you brought that up, Juan Carlos, because that's definitely something that we've seen as a challenge as well. How do we communicate these to folks that are undocumented? And for instance, just to for people to even just start to imagine the fear that exists in the community, there was an article in the Washington Post, if I'm not mistaken, of someone who was undocumented, had COVID, and was really scared to go get medical care. And unfortunately, they waited for the sickness to get so bad that they ended up passing away. And this is definitely something that we're trying to prevent as much as we can. And one of the ways that I think that it has been very helpful for us to have, one of the things is there's a collaborative that was created through the Resiliency Fund that is called the Massachusetts Immigrant Collaborative. And it's a coalition. It started as a coalition, if I'm not mistaken, of 11 organizations or 12. And I think it's closer to 18 to 20 organizations that received funding from the Boston Resiliency Fund. And this funding was basically all funding that would be given to immigrant communities regardless of their immigration status. So one of the most effective strategies that we find is to work with nonprofit organizations that the community already trusts, for folks to go directly to that organization to receive assistance. And some of the assistance that they were receiving from these nonprofit organizations was actually direct cash assistance to then cover some of the most essential things that they needed during the crisis. They're doing food distribution. They were providing before the rental relief fund some assistance also to pay for rent. So that is probably one of the most effective ways that we found to work with communities. But I think to keep amplifying the message that the city of Boston is here for everyone is really important. And the fact that this money, the funding from the Boston Resiliency Fund, was available to everyone regardless of immigration status, I think already says a lot.
Thank you for that work, Carol.
Do we have any other questions from the board? Or any questions from members of the public?
Yes,
I'm sorry?
yes, I have a question. This is David Vieira.
Oh, David, go ahead, please.
Yes, at the
Can you
beginning-
announce your full name and where you're from, David?
Yes, thank you. This is David Vieira from Hyde Park, and I'm a frequent visitor to these meetings. Toward the beginning of your presentation, you said that there were some services that required that a waiver be signed. Can you outline what the reason for the waiver is?
Yes, so I believe that you're referring to the waiver that people have to sign for the immigration clinic. So the purpose of the waiver is to make sure that people have an understanding of what the consultations are before they actually receive the consultation. The consultations, the city of Boston doesn't necessarily provide that consultation. We recruit private immigration lawyers. They're volunteers, and they volunteer their time to provide these consultations over the phone. So it's basically, we just have these forms for people to really have a full understanding, that it's not necessarily the city of Boston that is providing the service, that, it's just a disclaimer to a certain extent. So that is a form that we ask people to fill out before they have the consultation with the immigration lawyer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that explanation.
Yeah, of course. And I'm happy if you were interested in just looking at the actual form, would be happy to send that information. That's what we send to anybody who would be interested in signing up for the immigration clinic.
No, I appreciate the offer, but I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Do we have any other questions from the public? Hearing none. Carol, thank you very much for your presentation, and I'm glad that you and the Commissioner's Office will be connecting about a future webinar. I think that would be very helpful.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for having me again. I will jump off and I will let everyone continue with the meeting. But if you have any questions, just can share my email and my contact information. Me and my team are available to all of you for whatever you might need, whether now or in the future.
Great.
Thank you so much, Carol.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you.
Excuse me, Jerry, request.
Oh, sorry, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Oh, no, sorry, this wasn't for Carol. I just thought the quickest way to alert Jessica, Commissioner, and Jerry is that right now the camera is focused on the other interpreter, and so I just don't know the technicalities of that.
So both interpreters are on the screen, and Wes is able to pin them as he sees fit.
Perfect. Okay, and so can the public if needed.
Yep.
Thank you.
No
Great,
problem.
thanks for bringing up any concern, Elizabeth. I appreciate that. Before I move on to my very brief report, it was my understanding that we have Councillor Ed Flynn joining us tonight. If Councillor Flynn is still on the line on the phone, I invite him to say hello and make any brief remarks that he might have. I know he's been a very, very staunch advocate for our work and for the disability community in Boston. So we appreciate that, and we welcome him to the meeting. Councillor Flynn, are you there?
I believe you might be muted, Councillor Flynn, because I understand that you were on the phone, so it's *6 to unmute yourself.
Yes, hi everybody. This is Ed Flynn. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
Oh, I just wanted to say to the commission, I respect and admire the tremendous work you're doing in helping and advocating for persons with disabilities. And I was listening to the conversation about language access. I was listening to the conversation about supporting our immigrant neighbors, and it's great to see so many people in city government working together, because a lot of these issues do overlap. So I just wanted to let you know that if there's anything I can do to be helpful to you, please let me know. And I hope to have a city council hearing sometime in the near future on support of persons with disabilities. And just as an FYI, I'm also active with the Disabled American Veterans. I served 20-something years in the military and active with the Disabled American Veterans Organization here in Dorchester. So again, just want to say thank you for the opportunity, but more importantly, thank you for the tremendous work that you're doing across our city.
Great. Well, thank you. Also, Councilor Flynn, I know you've had a prior hearing to hear about issues facing the disability community, and we look forward to the next opportunity as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's great to be with you.
Great. And now we'll move on to my very brief report. I wanted to just acknowledge the hard work that Carl did with bringing up the issue of access around the mail-in ballots, and we talked at last meeting about possibly doing a letter in support of any to the Secretary of State's office, urging them to follow the state law that was passed that's saying that they had to provide accommodation, they had to provide a mail-in option and a more accessible mail-in option for folks, and through the work of BCIL and other advocacy agencies, the the Secretary of State's office for the primary did, kind of at the 11th hour, did provide an accessible option, although not perfect, as Carol mentioned at last meeting. It was a more accessible option than we had before, and I know that BCIL, particularly, and Disability Law Center is also advocating for an even more accessible option for the general election. So, I wanted to again thank Carl for bringing up the issue, and folks do stay in touch with BCIL and Disability Law Center, and hopefully we'll get an even more accessible option for the general election coming up. But also, as I've said for the last several meetings now, regardless of how we're able to vote, it's very important for everybody to exercise their right to vote. Again, our lives depend on it, so it's very, very important to vote. On a lighter note, I wanted to recognize our own board member Zari, who is receiving the Marie Felton Award this year from the Boston Center for Independent Living. They're going with an all-virtual ceremony this year on October 1st. So please, if you can, attend that ceremony. Zari is very deserving. She's been a longtime advocate for folks with disabilities, and she's very deserving, and all the award recipients are very deserving of the award this year. So with that, I will move on to the Commissioner's report.
Thank you, Jerry. And just before I kick it off, can I ask Carl if you're still on the phone? Have you heard anything recently about the mail-in ballots for the general election? Or if anybody else has heard anything?
Like I said,
This is Carl.
go ahead, Carl.
So, it's not perfect, and there's some discussion among attorneys at DLC whether they're going to file future complaints shortly. You can request to fill out an accessible form and mail it out, but there are some, and I don't know all the details, but there are some concerns still, and DLC is debating what the next steps are.
I know some of the concerns are around the fact that, right now the accessible option would be you have to print out your own ballot, and a lot of folks in general, plus folks with disabilities, don't have access to printers right now, particularly during COVID. So again, like Carl said, it's not a perfect option at this point, and we'll see if DLC decides to move forward.
Great, thank you for that update. And my office will be following it closely too, and we'll keep in communication with all the board members. So to kick off my report, first of all, I just wanted to say that was a great presentation from Carol. And I wanted to really emphasize to the board members that, you were all appointed by the mayor, and as Councilor Flynn said, you all do a great job. We really value your input and when you write letters, because they really carry some weight, and they're really about important issues that we all care about. So I really want to emphasize the fact that we hope you will take the information that you learn at these board meetings and spread it to your community. And even if that's just letting them know, even if you email the presentations that we sent to you, just so people have the information, because the more people that you can help inform on the ground level, that's really just going to help people get what they need, especially in this difficult time of COVID. So please let me and my staff know if there's anything we can do to support you in your efforts. But I know you all have your own communities and networks, different disability type networks, friendships, social things, work related. So please do take it upon yourselves to spread all the information that we're sharing with you, because we really appreciate it. And sometimes just hearing it from a friend or a colleague goes a long way, because sometimes, especially when we talk about people who are immigrants, there's a lot of mistrust of government. So if we can help to break down any barriers like that, we really want to help to do that. So again, appreciate it. Let us know if you need any resources from us. So a few announcements I just wanted to make. We haven't been doing our architectural access updates since we went to this new format. But one project I did want to bring to your attention is the Boston Common is doing a master plan. So it's going to inform the design of the Common for the next decade or more. So they have a few public meetings coming up, and we can either chat them now or we can send you an email. But it would be really important to get input on that from people with disabilities. And I'm going to try to schedule them to come to next month's board meeting so they can present about the accessibility things they're working on, and you could ask questions. But in the meantime, the public sessions are coming up in the next week or two, so we invite you all to attend those. Other things that I want to let you know about, there will be a housing search webinar on September 30th at 3 p.m. That's from the city's Office of, the Department of Neighborhood Development, Office of Housing Stability is hosting a webinar that's specifically on people with disabilities searching for housing. And I know that housing is a huge need in Boston, especially affordability. I mean, it's really for people with disabilities, it's three things. It's affordability, it's accessibility, and it's availability. So in these times of COVID, it's even more difficult. And especially with the eviction moratorium coming up at the end of the year, we're worried that it's gonna be people really falling off a cliff. So this housing search webinar is really important. And we don't have the flyer yet, but as soon as we have it, we will get it out to you. And hopefully, again, like you can spread it to your networks. It's going to be talking about everything from Boston Housing Authority to Section 8 to the lottery units for different levels of median income. They go everywhere from 30% to 90% of area median income. And I think it's really helpful for people who are just, in the position where they need housing. So we're working closely with the Office of Housing Stability to ensure that we can do all we can to help people with disabilities find housing, because accessibility is such a big barrier. I just know for myself, using a wheelchair, that sometimes looking for those apartments and units can be really difficult, and because you can't just rent any place, you need an accessible unit. But people with other types of disabilities, some of them might need a first floor unit or somebody who needs sensory accommodations. We want to make sure we consider all those things. And I know my architectural staff works very closely on new developments in Boston to ensure that they're all accessible. So I want to give a shout out to Patricia and Sarah, who are on this call, for all of their hard work in creating accessible units in Boston. Thank you very much to my staff. And like I said, I'll get you the flyer as soon as I get it, but it's scheduled for September 30th at 3 p.m. and it will be a virtual training. So even if you're not looking for housing, we welcome you to attend if you have time, so you can take the information and spread it to community members. Also, the Boston Police Department is having a series of listening sessions. I don't have all the dates with me right now, but I do know that they are coming up in the next week or two, and they will be translated into numerous languages for all communities to be able to participate and are welcome to participate, especially in this time of all the issues going on with safety and violence in different cities. We want to make sure that we are in communication with the police. And we know that there are certain issues related to people with disabilities and policing. So that's something that we haven't done a lot with, but hope to take on moving forward, because it's a real issue. And we hope to work on training with the police and having them have the resources available that they need when working with people with disabilities. So I'm going to ask Jessica if she can put a note to herself to send out the dates of the listening sessions, and you're all welcome to come. They're also virtual. Pretty much everything I mentioned tonight will be virtual. Mass Health is also having a series of listening sessions. I know BCIL has been spreading that information, but I just wanted to mention it to you in case I know a lot of people with disabilities are on Mass Health. So they're looking for feedback on how the program's been working. And on that note, the PCA program had made a lot of changes during COVID. And if, for anyone who uses PCAs, you may know about that. I also have the latest information from the call today, this morning, about things that are remaining in place and things that are changing. The PCA hourly pay rate had gone up during COVID, but it went back down at the end of August to the typical rate. So that's one change that was made recently. And other than that, some changes are scheduled to end at the end of the year. So we're watching that closely because, I'm sure you're all aware that there's some concern that COVID could spike again over the fall and winter. So we want to make sure that we stay in touch with these agencies, because if we do experience another spike in COVID and people have to stay home again, we want to make sure that they get the care and the resources that they need. A few other announcements. You probably all know that the census deadline is in 1 week. We are coming to the end of the decade-long census, 2020. So if you haven't filled out your census, please do so. It's critically important that we count every resident of Boston so that we get funding and representation that we need. So please make an effort. You can do it online. It's very easy. I did it in about 5 minutes at the prompting of my wonderful chief of staff, who tweeted out a picture of me taking the census. So please make it a point to do it this week if you haven't done it yet. Also, Jerry had mentioned the elections are coming up. We work closely every year with the Elections Commission to ensure that all the polling places in Boston are accessible. Again, we will follow up with the Secretary of State and keep an eye on what the state's doing for accessible ballots. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to keep in touch with us, but you can always let us know about any barriers you experience in voting. We know that all the sites have the auto mark. Sometimes we've heard, anecdotally that the machine wasn't hooked up or that people weren't trained in how to use it. And we work very closely with the Elections Commission on training. So we really hope that doesn't happen. But if people are going to vote in person, please let us know if you experience any barriers. And we will work closely with the Elections Commission to mitigate those issues. Also, a few other things to note. It is flu season, and we're really hoping everybody will stay safe this year from the flu and COVID. So if you haven't gotten a flu shot, please make it a point to do so. You probably know that the governor has issued a mandate for all students to get flu shots. So if that affects anyone on this call, please know that that is a mandate. And if not, please, we encourage you to do so anyway. We have information on flu clinics on the Boston Public Health Commission website. It's another thing that we can tweet out to you, and they'll be readily available. There's no shortage of flu shots that we've heard of this year, so we really encourage everybody to do that. Just a few more things, and then I will end my report. One thing I wanted to mention is, I think you're all aware that we instituted a program where we gave out ramps to different restaurants in the neighborhoods that opened on the street. So now we're looking to repurpose the ramps to bodegas and small grocery stores that are providing food for people in the neighborhoods, also food pantries. So if there are any places that you visit on a regular basis that are like the old mom and pop stores that may have one step, please let us know, because those are the types of places we want to provide ramps for. They're no cost, they're free, and we hope to get over that barrier so people can get food. As people start to go out again, we really want to mitigate the barriers where people can't access food, whether it's in a restaurant or at a bodega or a corner market. Because I know there are some in my neighborhood that they're older buildings, they have that one step. Main Street USA is infamous for having that one step, which is such a barrier to people with mobility disabilities. So please let us know if there's any place in particular that we can reach out to. You're my eyes and ears in the neighborhoods. So if you see any buildings that you think could benefit from that, restaurants or markets, please let us know. And then the last thing I have an update on is the issue of City Hall Plaza. Jessica gave me a nice update today that there's a giant hole in the middle of the plaza, and they're working very busily on creating the accessible new plaza that we're all excited about. So when we met with Chief Brophy a few months ago, we had talked about doing a written agreement to ensure that the brick path remains accessible, and if it doesn't, we'll go back and revisit it next year. So I'm in the process of drafting the agreement right now, and I'll share it with Chief Brophy and his staff at the Public Facilities Department. And once I get the go-ahead from them, I will share it with you all. I know it's been some slow going on my end just because we've been very busy with COVID response, but I do have the draft in progress, and I hope to share it with you next month. So that's it from my report, and if anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them.
I know Elizabeth had a question.
Yes. So thanks for those, for both updates. Commissioner, I had a question. As you and your staff are aware, I recently submitted a situation in my own neighborhood, the end of my own street, regarding a sidewalk that was inaccessible for well over a week. And what I did first and deliberately was to go through the Boston 311 number, so I would know if someone were experiencing, for two reasons. One, because that's what I have used for smaller scale issues like missing bricks on the sidewalks in my neighborhood where hasn't been a need to involve the commission. But also just so I would have information in following up with you and Jessica to be able to tell you what was the response. And in this case, although I described a situation with specificity, what block of a side street, but off a major thoroughfare street, was completely shut off to pedestrian traffic because of scaffolding. And ironically, they first had no signage. The signage they eventually put up just said, caution overhead. But it forced anybody to walk down the side street in the street, and trucks, larger vehicles are allowed to turn down that side street. And then for anyone in a mobility device like a wheelchair, that even a portion that where a commercial garage is being worked on, or the structures above it, that and someone in a wheelchair, the pitch of the remaining sidewalk would still be too steep. So for future reference, how would it be advisable to go for anyone who's experiencing what I otherwise would have thought first belonged in the Department of Public Works, to go directly to your office? And so just to let the commission members and the public know what happened is that they closed my case a few days later and said it should be a constituent complaint. And that surprised me. And at that point, I both was able to get photos and to request the commissioner and staff assistance on it. As of today, it remains unresolved. It might be that now there's not that many more days with the scaffolding. But so all in all, this might have been about a 2-week project involving what might be, I don't know if that's a private, but private to a building, but it's certainly not an individual's garage, versus it's not public parking. And then the adjacent sidewalk, how in the future would you recommend someone pursue that problem?
Yeah, thank you, Elizabeth. We did get that email from you with the pictures. Can you just remind me, because I looked at them, but it was a few days ago, did they provide a temporary ramp to get into the street? Not at all.
There's no, just you go from, it's Huntington Ave is what I'm talking about, and for people who have familiarity with the Copley Square area, that it's the part of Huntington Ave where the Prudential Mall is on one side of the street with the Skywalk, the Prudential Mall and Star Market, and on the other side is the Marriott, the Copley Marriott. And this one of the major crosswalks across, several lanes of traffic in both directions, with an island in the middle, is that you end on a small side street that gives you there's no temporary, let alone protected. It's just everyone his or herself. I have to say, I am really surprised at that, because Public Works does a really good job with the emphasizing and training contractors that they have to do the temporary ramps. And sometimes myself, when I'm just wheeling around the city, I am expecting not to see them during construction, and I literally always see them. So I am very surprised at that. And I know my staff looked into it, and I don't believe that we've heard back yet. If anybody has any updates, I welcome them to jump in. But I would say in the future, certainly 311 should be the vehicle to issue that complaint. And
we can look into why that happened in this particular case. But we would also emphasize that people can certainly contact us, because if it's a two-pronged approach, that will help resolve it. We hope it would help resolve it more quickly. But as you said, you shouldn't have to necessarily reach out to my office. It should be able to go through Zoom.
No, I mean, it was a safety issue for anybody, but I didn't get the police department involved. I frankly don't know how, because it wasn't an emergency situation in that sense, and you know, an ongoing, like a car accident. But the other thing that was disturbing about it is it did get a contractor, someone working, it might not be the head contractor, but what got his attention was when he saw me taking photos. And he came over and introduced himself to me and said it would be going on for about another week, and was justifying the need for scaffolding, which was really not the point. You know, that I have no problem that scaffolding was needed. It's just the temporary sidewalk, and we have one. In this general Copley area that was going on right now on one. I can't remember if it was St. James Street or Stewart Street, one of the major streets, and they had done that, erected one of those orange barricades, and so all traffic, let alone with the ramp. So just
I think Patricia might have an update.
Yeah, Patricia has a comment or an update.
Hi, Elizabeth. Can you hear me?
I can.
I don't have an update, but I knew that I was going to see you today. So I sent the pictures yesterday when I received them, and then I checked again today. So I'll continue to check. I'll check again tomorrow. The way it usually happens is that I ask the transportation department, and that person contacts the contractor directly to make sure that they're following the rules. Of course, the rules are that during construction, they have to keep the accessible routes. So that's in their contract. So that's usually the way it works. Like they just sometimes needed to be reminded if for some reason they're not providing the accessible route. So I'll continue to check tomorrow, and I'll let you know as soon as I hear. And thank you so much for bringing it up.
Yeah, well, I just figured if it could happen in this case, it might happen in others. Frankly, I think the reason that it wasn't brought to the attention or by more people is that it happens to be a dead-end side street, so it doesn't involve as many, not as many people are as affected. I think, frankly, if it was
Elizabeth, you're cutting off in and out.
That's okay then. Thank you for looking into it.
And Elizabeth, one thing too is we've had circumstances where 311 has closed the case before it seems like it's resolved. The issue with that might be that they passed it on to a different agency within the city, like maybe they passed it on to transportation, so they close it out on their end. I'm not sure if that's the case in this circumstance, but we can find out about that too.
Well, at that point, I decided I didn't pursue it as a constituent complaint. They might have, but I still think I recognize the importance of having your office involved. So thanks.
Thank you.
Commissioner, just FYI, your audio was a little wonky there as well. So I thank everybody for their input, but if we have no other questions for the commissioner or about the commissioner's report, we'll move on to the captioning ordinance that the commission and the board are working on, and I know the commissioner was going to take the lead on that discussion as well.
Yes, thanks, Jerry. How's my audio now?
Fine.
Okay. So I believe you all got the draft of the policy document that I wrote up. So I submitted this to the mayor's administration and to the different economic development people that we have to work with in the city. So that is the first step, to see what their thoughts are, to get their hopeful buy-in. And I did a lot of research, so I did find out about other cities that have this type of ordinance, and some complaints that they've gotten, some issues that we want to get ahead of if we are to implement it. And the one thing that I felt was important was to look at the enforcement of a potential ordinance, because as you all know, the restaurant industry is, and just so everybody knows, this ordinance is in relation to captioning, in mandating captions for businesses that have TVs that face the public. So our board member Wesley Ireland had suggested several months ago that Boston look into creating a mandate for places of public accommodation like restaurants, bars, gyms, hospitals, places like that, for any TVs that they have, that they would be mandated to turn the captions on to provide access for deaf and hard of hearing. So we did do a draft, which I just said, like, I submitted to the administration to get their feedback. And the one thing that I did want to discuss was the enforcement of a potential policy like this, because we know our restaurants are really up against it economically and administratively. So we don't want to burden them at this time, but we do want to promote the accessibility for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. So instead of a fine structure, we're hoping to implement a complaint process for enforcement that could go through either a city office or the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. And I did, in my research, I found that different cities have both of these types of enforcement, so that was what I was hoping to pursue. And other than that, it would just be, like I said, a mandate for businesses to turn on captions. And it's very easy to do. It's just a simple function on the TV. There is no cost to it. And once you turn it on, it just stays on. You don't have to go back and switch it. So I don't think it would be much of an administrative burden for businesses. It's just that we want to be sensitive to the fact that they are really, they have a lot going on right now in terms of just trying to stay open. So the only feedback I've gotten so far, and it will be more of a discussion, is that if we were to look at this, would it be more of just a business policy, or would it be a potential city council ordinance? And just waiting for more direction on that and more feedback from the different city departments. So it's in draft right now, and I welcome any input or feedback on the document that I shared with you.
I know, this is Jerry. I know for me, I would think having it as a formal ordinance, you know, and the backing of the city, I think it would carry more teeth to it. It would seem like it would anyway. So hopefully they would agree to that. You know, so, and I know Wes has a couple of follow-up comments or questions, so go ahead, Wes.
Yes, I do. Thank you. So, thank you. This is Wes speaking through an interpreter. First of all, I want to say a huge thank you for all of your hard work, for making this possible, for putting this draft policy together, for seeing if it could become an ordinance, all of that. Thank you. I've been thinking about mandating captions and the concerns about fines and the challenges that come along with that, and all of the challenges that have come along with COVID as well. And I'm thinking about that, and I can see maybe pros and cons of both. So I would suggest maybe we offer a grace period at this point and we see how it goes. We don't automatically start off by fining people, but we offer this grace period. We see how people are following this protocol and see what the state of Maryland did. They don't have a fine. And so I think we can look and see what happens there in the early stages, especially, and what happened as their process continues, what was effective there. And maybe we could pull some of those ideas from there. And a grace period would definitely help. And then we could see how seriously businesses are taking this. I mean, one simple step of turning captions on should be taken seriously. So if we offer this grace period and we use that as a gauge, that would help. So that's one comment. My second comment, I'm a little bit surprised when you involved the MCAD, the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination office, that office. So for any businesses who are following this to involve that, I suggest maybe including 311 to report the problem. because, you know, thinking about people sometimes who they don't know who to talk to, it would be really easy for people to take a picture and send it with no captions on 2311. That would be easily recognizable, and then they could direct it to the right office, who will then follow up, and maybe they could send it to the Mass Commission Against Discrimination. So those are my two big comments. I'm really honestly excited to see how this program goes and proceeds, and to see how if this happens. I mean, this would be a huge impact for me and other residents living here in Boston. So thank you, and I'm excited about this.
Yeah, no, thank you, Wesley. Those are great comments. I can tell you about the MCAD. That would be like a final step. If it's an ordinance, then it would be something that people could file a discrimination complaint against anyway. So MCAD would be something that would just automatically sort of be in place as an option. But definitely I wouldn't suggest it as the first option. What I'm hoping to do is work with the city department that would be the one that would oversee that. And like you said, it could be like a 311 complaint. I would definitely want to keep it local within Boston for enforcement as a first step. But, and again, this is all in draft. This is just proposing things. I have to do a lot more work with the city agencies to figure out what would really be the best approach. But like even now, when people file an ADA grievance with me and they say the city's discriminating against them, I do the first take at it. I look into it. The first thing I do is just try to fix it. So if someone says, I've been discriminated against because I want to go to this meeting and it wasn't in an accessible location. So the first thing I'll do is I'll reach out to, say it's the school department. I'll reach out to them and say, okay, you can't have meetings in, say, a Catholic school that has stairs and no elevator. So we definitely try to fix it informally, because that's always the best approach, just to make people understand and fix it. And then if that doesn't work, people, if they're not happy with the resolution that I try to make, then they can appeal it to my cabinet chief. And if they're not happy with that, then they can go to the MCAD. And they can also always file a federal complaint under the Department of Justice. So there are just multiple ways to approach it. And the issue of fines, I agree with the grace period, because we said we really want to promote cooperation. We don't want to be seen as like a policing state. We want to really promote this. And if it does come to pass, we would certainly do a lot of outreach to businesses and promote the benefits of it, like that it will help everybody, which I tried to flesh out a little bit in my document. So I think that grace periods are a great idea. And the fine structure, it could even be a possibility under this plan, in that like MCAD can issue fines if it comes down to it. And again, this is down the line. It would never be something we recommend for a first step. Like if you go into a restaurant one time and they don't have captions on, I don't think people are going to rush to MCAD and file a discrimination complaint. You know, there are many ways we can look at it, like either just asking them or letting them know about the ordinance. And we can do information flyers if it comes to it. So I think it's a very, we're at the very beginning stages of crafting this policy. And I really value your input in bringing those two things up. But again, MCAD wouldn't be a first option. It would be like a last option. Does that help or make sense?
Yes, definitely, and thank you for clarifying. I understand it completely.
Great. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, any other questions or comments from the board in regards to the draft or the proposal?
Olivia?
Yeah, I've encountered this in my own daily life because for some reason I like to keep the captioning on. That sometimes there's just the caption feature may be on, but the program itself is not captioned. And I'm hoping that there's going to be something, where a business can back up that it wasn't them.
I don't know a lot of the technical details of captioning. I don't know if Carl is still on.
Yeah, Carl.
Yeah, I'm here. So technically today, unless you get a waiver request, if it's on broadcast or cable, 100% of television programs should be captioned. It's a little different for streaming media, but as far as broadcast and cable, 100% of television broadcast should be captioned unless the people get a waiver from the FCC.
So what you're saying, Carl, this is Jerry, is that what Olivia experiences should be few and far between.
Extremely few and far between, unless it's streaming media, from the web. That's different.
Right, like Netflix or Hulu.
Right. Or YouTube or anything, yeah.
No, ironically, it's a lot of CNN. I have
Well,
issues.
CNN should be 100% captioned because they would not get a waiver because they're not under a financial burden or hardship.
Yeah, their captioning cuts out quite a lot.
So how could she follow up with that?
She would have to file a complaint with the FCC.
Okay.
And as we go further down the line in creating this potential policy, we can put information like that within it. So people will have, knowledge about what to do in different circumstances. So that's good to know, Olivia. And Carl, you're always so helpful since you serve on the FCC committee. So thank you for your input.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you. I thank Wes and you, Carl, for your help in drafting the board's letter in support of the ordinance, and I echo Wes's excitement about it moving forward. I think it could be something that's beneficial to thousands of city residents and visitors to the city. So I
Do we need to vote on the letter?
I was going to mention that.
Should,
Yes, I would say so.
Has everybody had a chance to review the letter?
This is Carl. I make a motion that we vote on sending the letter to the appropriate parties in support of the office.
Second that.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Prior to the final vote, though, Elizabeth has a question, I guess. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
The vote is the more important one. But just as in follow-up to both what Wes had mentioned and then Olivia's comment that, as well as the commissioners, that I think as part of the rollout or whatever is not rollout, but in trying to have this ordinance that we're about on implemented, that I think it should be that if there is programming in establishments, restaurants, bars, whatever, that where it is the program itself, then as just a further down the road issue, the programming really in those settings needs to be prioritized for the many. I think, but that's a more subtle point, but in keeping with both wanting it to, view it as a positive, certainly as a positive, but even that it's not trying to, that it wouldn't be trying to issue punitive measures against businesses. That's similarly that even if there are some patrons that happen to like a more esoteric program that they have access to, that isn't encouraged in that space as part of the education.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So we have a motion on the floor to support the letter that was emailed to everyone in support of the ordinance.
Can I just clarify one thing? Can I just clarify one thing? Jerry?
Yeah, go ahead, Jessica.
Sorry, so this is in support of the letter that the board wrote that would then be attached to the ordinance that we are writing. So we're not mailing, we're not sending it to anyone. It's simply being attached to our policy ordinance proposal as a show of support, just so that everybody is clear on what's happening with the letter.
Sure. So what we should clarify that this motion is just for the support letter in regards to the ordinance. Is everybody comfortable with it as written at this time? Do you have comments or anything to add? So if we could hear a vote, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, it passes unanimously and will be attached with the ordinance. And again, thank you to the commissioner, the commissioner's office, Wesley and Carol for your hard work on getting this moving, particularly Wesley, because you brought it up many months ago. So I'm glad it's finally moving forward.
This is Carl. I just have a comment, if I might.
Go ahead, Carl.
So I'd let the folks at the FCC know we're doing this, and they're particularly interested in seeing how it goes. And I've also let a few legislators know, and they want to see how it goes to see if maybe eventually we can turn it into a state mandate. So let's see what happens.
That would be great. That would be really, really very, very positive.
Just one final comment, though.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
I just want to prepare everybody that it may still take time. You know, if it does indeed pass, you know, sometimes we have to do multiple iterations. Like there are some things, you know, you have to give and take on with the city. And I just don't want anybody to feel like it's a done deal at this point. It's still early in the process.
Sure.
Agreed.
I will certainly champion it, but there are a lot of multiple factors that we have to consider. Like I said, like I emphasize particularly the position that the businesses are in right now. So let's hope that we can do it. I really do see it as an issue of equity in reopening the city. So I hope to champion it and have an update for you soon.
Thank you again. Thank you for all your hard work. And we know, Commissioner, that your office will keep us abreast every step of the way. And again, please, anyone on the board, if there's an issue that's important to you, that we've agreed to work on, that we are working on, that you haven't heard an update on in a while, please, you know, either let me know, the commissioner know, her staff know, so that we can get an update on that. And again, it was through Wesley's advocacy and through Carl's advocacy that we've got to this point in regards to the ordinance. So I really appreciate everybody's hard work on it. So thank you. Next on the agenda, under old business, was the plaza renovation updates, which I think the commissioner gave in her report. But if there's anything else to add, Commissioner? You're also, there's no other update on the plaza? Okay. Any new business? Any new business?
I believe Elizabeth has something, and also Zari noted in the comments, please register to vote.
Thank you, Zari.
Which is very important. Do you have a new business item, Elizabeth?
Actually, I was referring back to Kristen, to the commissioner's remarks about the plaza. Just any sense of a general timetable? I know you've made it clear that you and Chief Brophy's offices need to work on that before we see it, but any sense of in the next few months or?
Yeah, I would definitely say in the next month or two.
Okay, thanks.
Before the end of the year, correct?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, great. Anybody else with any new business items? Or does anybody from the public who's online or is still online have any questions or comments regarding anything that we've discussed tonight?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is David Vieira.
And you're from?
David Vieira from Hyde Park.
Great,
Hello,
go ahead,
everybody.
David.
First of all, am I the only member of the public in attendance here?
You are not, David. There are a couple members of the public, including possibly, I hate to say it, maybe the second most famous second to you, which is Dolores, Commissioner Makasha's mother.
Oh, well, hello, Dolores. So, I found it interesting that the commissioner should have mentioned the issue that the restaurants and bodegas are in need of temporary ramps. And I'll make the point that it took a lot longer for us to get a temporary ramp at the library than it took for the restaurants to get temporary ramps during the COVID issue. So I want the commission to know that the Boston Public Library had commissioned 2 architectural firms, Shepley Bulfinch and Design Lab, to start a multi-million-dollar project at the McKim Building in Copley Square. And the temporary ramps at the library have been up for almost 2 years now, and they made a commitment at that time that a permanent ramp would be considered for future renovation. Now is the time for us to look at that, and I would like the commission to consider tapping the library's shoulder to make sure that a permanent ramp is part of this renovation project for the McKim Building in Copley Square.
David, you're gonna be so happy with my update. But,
Oh, good.
okay. The Boston Public Library has already reached out to us proactively to tell us that they are just kicking off their planning right now, and they want to get our input for the whole process. So one of the big pieces of this renovation is accessibility, because they know that it's an issue. And frankly, I don't think that the city would do a major renovation like that without creating access. So it is guaranteed 100% that entrance will be accessible. I can tell you that.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. It's great to know that the library is paying attention.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, so you comment about the restaurants and grocery markets. You know, the reason why we had to act quickly on that was just because we were trying to help people get food.
Oh, I know.
I just don't want you to think, I mean, your advocacy was so strong and so important for so long with the library, and believe you me, we give you all the credit in the world. We know that it was thanks to you that the ramp is up and functioning, but you know, we are just trying to, you know, when COVID hit, we tried to meet the emergent needs of the community, and of course, food is the most important thing. So that's why every city department tried to act quickly to get people's basic needs met.
Commissioner, I fully understand, and I didn't mean to imply that I was dissing the restaurants or any of the other issues that we're dealing with right now. The other thing I'd like to just touch base on, does anybody know if Councilor Flynn is still on the line?
He left the meeting shortly after his comments.
Okay, I'm back with the issue of bikes. I was crossing Newbury Street last week, and I was sideswiped by a biker going the wrong way on Newbury Street. Once again, I'll bring to the Commission's attention that there's no enforcement on these traffic regulations for bicycles. And I really think we need to continue to shine a spotlight on the fact that bicycles have rules too, including traffic rules, parking rules, and all the other things that go along with public safety for pedestrians. So I'd like the commission to follow up on some of those issues in the future. Thank you.
David, you're gonna be even more happy with this update.
Okay.
We have
So-
a, we have a staff person who's our outreach and engagement specialist, and she has been working on a bike safety outreach plan for a while now. We've just, like I said, we got a little sidetracked with COVID response, and our staff person was going to a lot of, doing a lot of work with, you know, housing evictions and food and things like that for outreach and engagement. But she's recently gone back to the bike plan, and she's getting together a list of different organizations that we're going to work on training in this these topics, and it will probably be something like a webinar. So we will definitely loop you into that, but it's going to be the first step in our outreach and engagement on bike safety, because we know that this is an issue, and we, again, thank you for bringing it up. But that should be launched in the next month or two, hopefully.
Well,
Can you have that staff member get in touch with me, please?
Absolutely.
I will definitely get to you. It's Melinda, the
Okay.
outreach engagement
That's
specialist.
Melinda, yep. She's done a great job on it.
Okay.
I'll
And
definitely be
I-
reaching out to you.
I do want to thank the commission for all the work that they do, and I know that every one of you individually and collectively work very hard to do what you do. And Olivia, could you ask the office to give you my contact information? I'd like to speak to you directly on a couple of things, please.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from the public? I know Elizabeth has a follow-up, but I want to give other members of the public who may still be on the call an opportunity to comment first.
I just want to note, sorry, this is Jessica. I just want to note that I believe there are a couple members of the public that are on, that if they happen to have questions related to the board meeting after the fact and they would like to get in touch with our office, I know that at least we had one or two Northeastern journalism students on. We get journalism students every year when they're assigned to come and watch a public meeting. And so we just wanted to reach out and say that if you have any questions about either what you heard at the board meeting or about what our office does, feel free to email us at disability@boston.gov. So you don't need to say anything now during public input, it's totally fine, but if you have questions for us in the future, please reach out and follow up with us.
Great, thank you for that, Jessica, and that's true at each and every meeting. You can certainly comment or follow up with us, offline if need be, or you feel more comfortable doing it that way. But hearing no more public input, I know Elizabeth has a follow-up. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Yes, this actually was somewhat in follow-up to David's question, but also is one for the commissioner. Is there any basic timetable of when the library project, when they plan to get underway?
I just got an email this week. Well, actually, it was about a week ago, but then my contact who's working on it was on vacation, so we circled back this week, just today, actually. And I don't know the timetable for the construction. Patricia, do you happen to know that? I would assume it's a multi-year project. I think it will take a while.
Yeah, actually what I really meant is that the design process, because unlike the plaza example, I know Jerry and I and others, many of us on the board expressed that in addition to your office, which is so important to have your expertise and involvement, but that our advisory board also be involved at the design phase of things and not brought in later in the process, because there are some important issues regarding, not only that we ourselves and our communities we represent a number of different perspectives, but also that because that has been the historic side of the building, maybe their art and architecture boards. I know for myself, I'm sure they're going to redo the door, but for instance, although I can navigate my power wheelchair successfully through a lot of tight doorways, that when I was using that entrance to drop off my mail-in ballot, they had 2 people undo the current door. I'm sure they don't intend to keep that, but my real request is just that our advisory board brought in at the design level and early on.
Yeah, I think that's critical. And for those of you who don't know how my office operates, Patricia is our Director of Architectural Access, and Sarah is our Architectural Access Specialist. And their only role in my office is their main role, they do a lot of other things, but their main role is to do exactly that. They work with other departments pre-design when they first decide to do a building, if it's a new construction, or when they first decide to do a renovation. So they are in at the very beginning level, and they advocate for all of these issues. And believe me, they don't let it go. They push and push and push, and we go back and forth, and we create the most ideal access we can. But that being said, I do understand your concerns because of some of the issues that happened with City Hall Plaza. And I think what we can do is when they get to the point where they have a broad-based design with input from my office, we can bring them to present at the board. It will still be at a time where we can give input on the design, but they'll just be a little bit farther down the road. And I can reach out to them and see what they think a good timetable would be for that. But definitely we can say that it will be a point where they can still take your feedback and design, absolutely.
Yeah, well, we can discuss further offline, but my understanding is the earlier conceptually that we can have some input, that sometimes can result then in having issues brought to the table that even given their expertise, that the additional lived experience of the board or people in the community, but particularly of this board and our the expectations of us as board members. That's how we can best help, is if it's not when things are very close to done or groundbreaking, but even when it's at the level of design A, B, or C kind of thing, of just some input, even if, then the decisions will ultimately be negotiated or made. Thanks.
Yeah, I know, I can't agree more. I think that's exactly what the board is designed for. And why don't I follow up with my contact in the Public Facilities Department who's working on the renovation and let him know that the board's very interested in giving some input. And I'll see what their thoughts are and when we can get them to speak to you.
Great. Thank you. And I really am amazed at everybody's, this is Jerry, I'm amazed at everybody's comments and thoughtful questions and how much work we've actually gotten done over the last few weeks and in tonight's meeting. So I really appreciate everybody's hard work.
And I want to give a real big shout out to my staff because they work so hard, especially during this pandemic. And they all have their specific roles and their expertise, but not only that, they just have covered everything that I've asked them to do. And I couldn't do any work that I do without them, so thank you all very much.
Great. Yes, thank you as well to Jessica and everyone. But with that said, we all know that everybody has on the board anyway, has our own lives and things we'd like to get going and do. So do I hear a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
Guess who's gonna make it?
Go ahead, Carl.
This is Carl. I make a motion to adjourn.
Any second?
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? I don't think so. The meeting is adjourned. See everybody next month. Please fill out your census if you haven't already done so. Register to vote if you haven't registered to vote, and then vote. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.